I think the most significant barriers that we face is we see things through two different lenses, two different realms of responsibility, the criminal side and then the role that DSS plays. We don't always understand what each other's duties are, but beyond that, we don't always understand, again, the unique challenges, the limitations. And that's probably the two biggest issues where a law enforcement officer might be pressing for putting a vulnerable adult into emergency protective custody. There may be this disagreement on, well, has it risen to probable cause? That's a call that in an emergency situation, the law enforcement officer is going to have to step up and take responsibility for. We tell law enforcement officers, when you say emergency protective custody, you are legally taking physical custody of that vulnerable adult, whereas the DSS worker goes through a court process to apply for that EPC. And that's sometimes where we see a kind of some friction take place, not agreeing with the facts and circumstances that are presented. And so on the law enforcement side, we make that decision. We can make that decision 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. On the APS side, there may be some process in place or some indications where they can do that ahead of time, but as is common, they sometimes don't see that imminent danger to the vulnerable adult till they themselves are on scene. And knowing that they are limited or knowing that they have to follow a process that is time-consuming and then that time delay can endanger the vulnerable adult, they'll ask law enforcement officers to come in and do that EPC, that emergency EPC. And so those disagreements is where we see most of the disagreements take place, is agreeing to what the facts of the case are and definitively, was there abuse, was there neglect, was there exploitation, but the main key issue, is there an imminent danger to the vulnerable adult? Statute doesn't say, is there danger? There's lots of danger in these issues, but the word is imminent danger, and sometimes that imminency of the issue can be looked at differently depending on what part of the role or what role you're in with the situation. One other barrier that I might mention is just being available for conversation, making yourself available to going the extra mile. Because when we don't go the extra mile, the only person that suffers is the vulnerable adult. So make yourself available. We don't always work within 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Matter of fact, our roles and responsibilities oftentimes require us to operate outside what we call normal business hours. But you have to make yourself available for conversation and information sharing. Whether it leads to an EPC decision or it leads to a criminal charge of some kind, or just the discussion of what services to provide the vulnerable adult, if we don't make available each other for conversation, nothing's going to happen. So we got to talk.